You said earlier, your boyfriend, you said he's not conservative, but he's liberal, and you're much further left. You're leftist. And you said you would, when it comes to perhaps people, you would be friends with someone who's maybe more conservative, so you can shift them more left.
I said that tongue-in-cheek, but
you said that, well, I was going to ask, have you shifted your boyfriend more left?
I wish.
Okay, so he's pretty firm in his liberalism. He's
firmly planted in his filthy liberalism, but I love him in spite of that.
I see. Okay, got it.
But we align on a lot of social issues, so if we want to create a dichotomy of social and then economic issues, I feel like the economic issues is primarily where we have disagreement, and the social issues, those tend to be, I feel like, the most polarizing and contentious. So if we had more disagreement there, we probably would not be able to be in a relationship together harmoniously. So
okay, I see.
But friends, yeah, I'm open to radicalizing them, sure.
Okay, got it. So I'm curious, who here considers themselves a feminist? Maybe just show of hands. Are you a feminist?
I don't.
That's it? Just Aaron and Pixie? Molly?
And Molly.
A little bit? Okay. All right. So Charlie, we've got some feminists here. What do you think of feminism?
I want them to define the term first, because there's no use in me giving thoughts on an abstract concept. So, I'm all ears.
What's your sense? How do you define feminism?
Feminism is just simply the advocacy of equality, both social, political, economic, on the basis of all genders everywhere. So that's what feminism is to me.
Do you concur?
I concur.
Do you concur?
Concurred.
Okay.
So you want me to give a thought on that?
Do you agree with their definition of feminism?
That would probably be the most agreed upon definition. So I do believe in equality under the law, obviously. I believe in equality for representation or enfranchisement to be able to vote, obviously. But you said economic equality, that's interesting. Do you think that female models and male models should be paid the same by law?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we should make female actresses and models be paid less because they earn about 20 times more than men.
I think when you get
women would get a pay cut. You're okay with that?
I think when it comes to creative fields like that, it's going to be very difficult to look at it on the basis of sex or gender, how you would pay somebody, because that's going to have so many more factors than simply that. But if we're talking about equal economic opportunities, for example, should a man and woman doing the exact same position at a corporate office be paid the same if they're doing the same amount of work? Then yes.
Depends on what they study, depends how long they've been there, it depends if they're equally as good at the job, it depends
all else being equal. I'm saying if all of those things are equal, can we at least agree they should be paid the same?
That's already the law. So you're not allowed to discriminate based on gender or sex, based on a law passed in the 1970s.
Right, yeah.
However, what is now being tried to be passed through other movements is to try to swoop in and say, regardless of qualifications, how often you ask for a raise. So I'll ask a question. Why do you think, for example, the average male, it looks as if they earn more than an average woman in a city? Is it because of sexism or other factors?
I think sometimes implicit bias can be one factor among many, but all the things that you mentioned earlier, different qualifications, different business acumen, skills, work output, numbers of hours work could all be things that impact pay.
Right. So
and studies that focus on the gaps between men and women do make note of these differences.
Okay. Skiztech, thank you for the gift of 100 subs. Charlie, do you have a response?
No, I hear that. I do want to actually get back to even more of a fundamental question, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this.
Sure.
What is a woman?
Oh.
A woman is somebody who presents as our social conception of womanhood.
So
and acts in such a way.
So Pixie, just can you answer that question without using the word woman or womanhood?
It's because basically it would be a functional definition. So as a society, we have an understanding of what woman is.
What is that?
Man.
Yeah, that's basically.
I am a man.
Well done.
Can
you elaborate?
XY chromosomes.
Okay, but the problem with that is that I didn't check your chromosomes before coming in here and calling you a man, and you didn't check my chromosomes before coming in here.
Or genitals.
Or genitals, calling me a woman.
So let me just play this out. So first of all, you can't give me a definition without using the word woman.
That's a functional definition. Yeah, sure. Do you know what functional definitions are?
I'm very well aware, and you should have a functional definition for the most important question in civilization, right?
Well, the point of a functional definition, functional definitions are a definition that is by the function of something. So, like, for example,
No, there's an objective
1 equals
definition.
1 is like 1 is a function of 1. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do. So then, can you give me an objective, a functional, utilitarian, any sort of biological definition of what a woman is? Because
The problem
how
is-
can we debate feminism if we can't agree what a woman is?
I would even, like, I feel like Pixie's definition absolutely satisfies the definition of what constitutes womanhood, but I would define it only slightly differently, which is that it's a person who performs a set of social roles that are typically associated with feminine characteristics, but not necessarily, because there are even cis women who fall outside of this, and we still consider them women nonetheless. Like butch lesbians, for example, are women that exhibit very masculine characteristics, but nonetheless society understands them to be women. So
I find cis to be a very offensive word, by the way. I don't know how you feel about the cis.
I don't
women.
think
think it's hate
deeply about
speech,
that.
to be honest.
I didn't mean to trigger you, Brian.
As-
I would have
as
given
a
you a
s-
trigger warning before if I
So
had known.
do you think anyone can become a woman?
Yep, but not anyone will.
Okay, so then at what point do they become a woman?
It will depend on where they are in their gender transition for the most part.
Does it require drugs to become a woman?
No.
Personally, I think it's a mindset. It's a spiritual energy. It's the vibe that you give off. You know, like
The vibe. Before we continue on, I want to just give everyone an opportunity to answer
sure, go ahead.
No, totally fine. To answer Charlie's question, I know you two had already answered. What is a woman? Starting with you, we'll go around the table. Go ahead.
Can you skip me?
We'll come back to her.
I'm a woman.
That's the best answer. That's the one that Ketanji Brown Jackson should have given in front of the Senate.
So come back to you? Or?
Yeah, come back to me. Come back to me. Let me
Sure,
brainstorm
okay,
on
go
that.
ahead.
Same. I'm a woman.
What is a woman?
Like, I don't.
What about you? Can I have you tilt your mic down just
Yeah,
a
of
tad?
course.
Perfect. Go ahead.
right there.
Yeah.
I'm a woman, but I also do think that a woman is someone who identifies as a woman, and that's that.
I mean, theoretically, it's someone who's born with a womb, but this generation obviously has proven that men can turn into women. So I'm not discluding that. I still think that they should be perceived as what they're portraying themselves as. But technically, I still think trans girls, they are a version of a man, but they can still be classed as a woman, which is a bit tricky, but yeah.
Molly?
I'll say the same answer. I think what constitutes as a woman is the energy that you give off and that you want to put out into the world.
So if being a woman or a female is a mindset, can your age also be a mindset? Can you choose to be, can you just say I feel 14, which is a classifiable mental condition, by the way,
So I will say, yes, I know people that act way younger than they actually are, and they love acting way younger than they actually are. And I know people that, like act way older than they are, and they, and they pride themselves in that. And I think.
Okay, fair enough. So if a 35-year-old man claims he's 14, should we have any problem if he wants to have sex with another 14-year-old?
No. I'm not saying
No,
that you should.
Probably should have a problem, I think.
No, I'm not
Well,
saying that
good
they
idea to have a
should be
problem.
able to have sex, but
But
they can
who's to say
state
he's not 14?
I feel 14.
Right,
They're
but-
allowed to state that.
Okay.
Grid 1 Motorsports donated $200. The man who owns it paid himself 1.3 mil a day last year. He loves feminism.
okay.
Today men acting female can be better women than real women. Feminism has failed you. How can the patriarchy help you today?
That was beautiful, Grid 1. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Given a lot of
Yeah, he's
maximum.
so going back.
But if your identity is an energy or a feeling that can change, why would it be wrong for a 35-year-old to say he's 14? Therefore,
Because he's not.
But then how is someone who has male parts a woman if he's not
I feel
a
like
woman?
that's two different
It's
things.
Why?
different because you
It's
can't
a
go
mindset,
back
isn't
in
it?
time.
Your age isn't a mindset. I
Well,
mean,
but,
like,
but then why is your sex or your gender a mindset and your
Because-
age isn't?
I don't know which one is which. One of you could probably say, but sex and
Do you
gender
agree?
is
At
different.
least acknowledge that sex and gender are two separate
That-
things.
That's what I was gonna
There are
say.
0 genders, 2 sexes, and infinite personalities.
Well,
Okay.
Gender doesn't exist.
What do you mean?
Okay.
Sex does. So the parts you're born with is who you are.
How does gender not exist?
It's a 1960s clinical term, largely made out of the Academy of John
Clinical?
Money and Alfred Kinsey and many postmodern child psychiatrists, many of whom, by the way, were not really great people, but we don't have to go into that. But gender is a new term of the last 50 or 60 years. So,
yeah, but it still exists.
but personalities exist. We can agree with that. Proclivities or interests or likes exist.
So by that definition, then if you're a woman or a man, is your energy. It is your personality.
Well, yeah, the goal, or what used to be the case, is the vast majority, 99.9% of all people, their biology and their reality, or how they viewed their reality, I should say, were in alignment. And now that's not so much the case. So people are, first of all, there's many elements to this. People are told that they can become something they can't. So they go on a very, very damaging, self-destructive pattern of medical interventions that even if you're pro-trans, you have to acknowledge that a hysterectomy at age 17 is not exactly an easy surgery.
I don't think anyone at 17 should be altering their body. But
no, I agree.
Yeah.
It's happening right now. Thousands of young kids across the country are getting what is called gender-affirming care, but it's irreversible
Care or
damage.
surgeries?
Both. So puberty blockers and hormone
There's
blockers.
thousands of kids that are getting hysterectomies across the United States.
No, thousands of kids are getting puberty blockers or hormone blockers or puberty blockers. Probably even more, tens of thousands.
You could stop using those, though.
And as far as breast reduction surgery or hysterectomies, we don't know the number, but I'll even say it's probably only a couple dozen. It's probably, you're right, it's probably not thousands.
Right.
But we don't know the exact numbers, but an estimate is anywhere between 10 to 15,000 minors, and is growing, are currently receiving monthly doses of hormone replacement therapy, estrogenic therapy.
Yeah, but you can stop those and be like...
Well, that's the question, right? There's a lot of detransitioners that are speaking out that are not able to puberty is not an assembly line that you could just push a button and restart. That is a increasingly disproven scientific theory right now. Chloe Cole is one of the most famous detransitioners who, she's in her 20s and she was sold a bill of goods, and when she was 16 she said, I think I'm a man, and she went on a very, very aggressive regimen of hormone blockers and puberty blockers, and she has huge regret, and hopefully one day she'll be able to have children again. But it gets back to a question of so I'm just making a point, though, that these ideas have consequences. It's more than just a silly question. Oh, what is a woman? That if you can't answer it, or at the very least say that you should allow minors to become adults before they make these decisions, then, and this is not a small thing, the quote-unquote gender-affirming care, we know that in California you have to be 18 years old to get a tattoo, and yet 14-year-olds can go to what we call a doctor and get a highly aggressive hormone replacement therapy treatment, sometimes without even notifying their parent. And all of these are ramifications of the inability to answer very simple biological questions.
I would be interested in seeing your exact study or citation for when it comes to puberty blockers, because I know a lot of people, or not a lot of people, there's a lot of people who end up on puberty blockers not because they're necessarily trans, but because they're going through puberty too early, and there are clear negative side effects and consequences of, let's say, a 10-year-old girl getting her period.
That's a separate. You're right.
But it's used on cis children. I think what you're talking about is precocious puberty.
But it's not used on perfectly healthy, physically able-bodied children, right? So there's a great book that I guess we have
Modest
to do this.
Hikima donated $200. Charlie, sorry you had to travel to California for the show. My boy did you dirty by putting you next to the demon, WTF?
I don't think you're a demon, by the way.
Props on the new Rick Rickson.
Okay, well, maybe you are a demon. May Christ be with
you are brain dead. Sad.
All right, Modest Hikima, good to see you in the chat.
I'll reference one book, and she's a non-political doctor. Her name is Dr. Miriam Grossman. It's a book called Lost in Transnation. She has treated, not just theorized. She's a clinician and a physician, not just someone who writes abstract medical journals. And she is one of the most outspoken people against what is called gender-affirming care, and she's treating hundreds of kids that are now damaged by this.
So I know detransitioners exist, but what do you say to the thousands of trans people that actually report happiness and being healthy after they receive gender-affirming care?
Don't doubt that in the short term, testosterone therapy from someone who has a fair amount of testosterone, it can make you feel confident. It can make you feel better in your skin. That is not a lasting effect, though.
But it is for some people.
Well, the suicide rate. I can't say that word. The self-harm rate after 8 to 10 years actually goes up. It nearly doubles, and we're still studying it. That's the other point. Is that I'm not going to throw around a lot of studies here. And they very well might be right. It might have helped them individually, but let me give you an example. If a medication is on the market and it harms 1 in 250,000 people, for example, Robitussin. You guys ever take Robitussin?
No.
No, it's a cough thing. It's, you know, they found that one of their lots of Robitussin last week might have been contaminated, and they did a massive recall, right? And it was
So many things are being
just a whisper of it, okay? The point that is in medicine, the first rule used to be first do no harm. And the
That
fact
still is, right?
no, they've changed
The
it.
Hippocratic Oath?
They've changed it, yeah. They have.
Who's they?
The American Medical Association and a lot of the medical institutions. It's
They've
similar,
been
but it's
changed
not
by
the same.
like woke ideology.
Well, you'd be surprised, actually. The medical industry's been taken over by a lot of radical
All
forces.
doctors are woke now.
Well, for example, I mean, when they were giving monoclonal antibodies in the city of New York, they were prioritizing people based on the color of their skin. Black individuals in New York got monoclonal antibodies above their white counterparts.
Was
But
it based on the color of their skin, or like maybe their background related to like their socioeconomic status?
It was racial, but I don't want to get too deep into that rabbit hole. But the point that I'm just trying to make is that in medicine in particular, you must have a cautious approach, even if there were pluses and positives, which might very well be true. If there's even a 1%, a 2% adverse event, you pull the drug immediately, because you first do no harm. If there's something that is actively damaging a society, and it's now a certifiable fact that we see thousands of young kids are being told that they can transition, when in reality they have other underlying issues that we should address. Depression, trauma, anxiety, or they're on the autism spectrum disorder, and they get mislabeled on whether a TikTok video or some sort of other thing makes them feel as if they might have, you know, a transgender issue when they very well might have other issues that need to be addressed. 1 in 27 men are young boys are autistic. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean
No,
to go
totally
deep into
fine.
it.
I just had a quick question for you two, since you guys had pretty strong positions on this. Can men get pregnant? Oh,
Grid
okay,
1
hold on.
Motorsports donated $200. If we want to talk numbers, then honesty requires we first admit that gender dysphoria is a mental condition which should be treated first before any physical treatments are given. Accuracy matters.
All right, Grid 1 Motorsports.
They no longer
Appreciate
call
it.
it gender dysphoria, unfortunately. I just want to, I would
What-
actually
do
make
you know
your
what they-
argument for you. They call, they don't even call it a medical condition. They call it, I actually don't even know what it's actually called. Gender dysphoria used to be the clinical term, but
They've changed it since.
so yeah, that's right. But I can go deeper into that. The old way we used to treat this is called watchful waiting, where we believed that puberty was the solution, not the problem. And almost every single case, and Europe was actually the pioneer of this, is that when you allow puberty to play its course, these individuals, they might end up being lesbian or gay, but not transgender. And that's a completely different thing that doesn't require hormones or eventually antidepressants on top of it. I'm sorry, Pixie, you were going to say something. So.
Yeah, my question was, can men get pregnant?
Two things. I would say if you're a biological male, if we're going to define male through biology or whatever, then no. I do want to push back on some things that I heard earlier.
Well, before you do that, go ahead. Aaron, do you have a answer to the...
I would say yes, because anybody who has a uterus has the capacity to give birth. So, for
okay.
example, a trans guy who gets pregnant, yes, would be a man who is pregnant. But if you're talking about a man who is assigned a man at birth and does not have a uterus, then no, he doesn't have the ability to get pregnant. You look at me like I'm crazy or what? Do you disagree?
But a lot of women.
So do you
can't
want to
get
know why
pregnant.
young men are going away from the left? That's why young men are leaving the left.
Why? They want to get
Why?
Because what you just said is...
Because they're uncomfortable acknowledging reality.
what you
That
just,
some trans men can
what-
get pregnant.
What
It's
you
like,
just said is at war with reality and, you know,
I
massacring...
mean, a lot of women can't get pregnant
basic
either.
vocabulary.
So that doesn't
That- yeah,
define
exactly.
It's just a
men
question.
or
It's just a
women.
question, you know. I'll let you come in just a sec, Pixie. Which one of you referenced chromosomes?
Me.
Is that well? You said like, oh, you didn't check our chromosomes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, people understood what a woman was before chromosomes were discovered. So the definition does not require this type of abstraction.
People understood what a woman was on the basis of the societal norms at the time, generally speaking, right?
Well, it's more
Which was my
precisely, it's about
answer,
like
yeah.
the gonads. If you were at any point in your life going to produce large gametes, then you're a woman.
How society, at least most societies as well, outside of like Western as well, but even Western, we can make this argument.
Okay.
What they would look at is the way that a person is like necessarily performing. So what is their role? That's why you have like the idea of like non-binary, third gender, et cetera, because there have been people also who have not performed their role as like a male or female. So they're put
Sure.
into the third category, third sex, whatever.
Okay.
So I would argue that for the vast majority, of human histories and societies, what they look at is what is your performance. And that maps on to what we do now, because we don't really look at biology, we look at people act. That's why, let me finish.
Go ahead.
That's why we also, the terms less manly, he's less of a man than him, or she's not that womanly, makes sense. If gender was truly a binary, those words would make no sense. It would be like cat and not cat. That doesn't, you can't have a in between, really. And the same thing applies for gender. There is a spectrum there. That's why the words less womanly, more manly, less manly make sense to us.
And all of those things are fluid throughout time. Like what constituted like masculine tendencies or behaviors will be different now than it was several years ago. Or even like things like colors. Like for example, pink used to be considered a masculine color. Pink is no longer really considered a masculine color. It's considered a feminine color. So there was never anything inherently masculine about the color blue or the color pink or anything like that. That could always change at any given point in time.
Do you think that male brains and female brains, or men and women brains, are different, wired differently?
There are differences between male and female brains, but I believe it's a matter of like statistical averages of like gray matter. There's not going to be like distinct anatomical features that differentiate a female brain from a male brain.
Really? You really think that?
Well, no, it's proven, like scientifically.
Well,
like
no,
when we
it's
take,
not.
yes, it
No.
is. When we take a brain scan of a male and female, the average doctor can't look and be like, that is a male brain right there.
Not true.
Now,
No, hold on.
Wait,
if
let me
you do a
finish my
SPECT
sentence, please.
scan, okay, if you do a SPECT scan, you can see what parts of the brain light up. And in a woman, the basal ganglia and the amygdala is far more active, which is the inner thought matrix. Women have a far busier inner thought life than men do. Would you guys agree with that?
I agree.
Right,
I was
but-
going to say it's very...
So that's not true.
It's very well known that like men generally are more on the logical side of things and women are more on the emotional side of things. And I think that has a big role, or the way that our brains are wired has a big role to play. I'm not saying that if you took babies who were completely unmolded that, you know, their brains would look different. But I think as we age, living in the gender that we are given, you know, our brains become attuned to certain things, and that's why parts of our
Yeah,
brain
like
light up.
piggybacking off of that
Yeah.
point, I don't doubt that the studies that you looked at did find differences in like brain mapping scans between men and women, but the key thing is that they looked at men and women. So that's already a brain that's been subjected to a lifetime, or not a lifetime, but like decades long
So do you-
socialization.
let-
so
I
that
just wanna
socialization is
make
going
sure-
to impact it. If you looked
Sorry, I don't mean
at
to
like a
interrupt,
brain
yeah.
scan of like infants, for example, like a male infant and a female infant, it would be like how different would it really
So-
look? Do you think it would look significantally different?
No, it's not even close. Of course it's different. And I can prove it to you in two ways. But the first one, do you guys know the John Money gender experiment?
No.
So, okay, I'll just really quick. John Money, who is a total creep, he believed that this is before we mapped the human genome. Okay, this is before we even knew about chromosomes. He said that men and women are blank slates at birth, and he said that they're formed through the toys we give them, the colors we appropriate to them, and they're blank slates. There was these identical twins. One of the twins burns themselves terribly in the genitals, and he said raise that twin as a girl. And basically his entire life he was tortured, and awful story, eventually rebelled against John Money. And this twin eventually was told that, hey, you were born a boy but raised as a girl, and even had a vagina put onto you artificially. And he was like, instead of being mad, he was relieved, because he said, I knew I was a boy all along. So there's no clinical evidence to support that. Secondly, though, it's a funnier one, okay? Do you hear me out? And I think this will resonate with all of you. Harvard University locked a group of men in a room alone, 100 of them, and a group of women in a room alone, okay? And they said, what did you think about for 30 minutes? The men, no surprise, sex and sports. The young ladies, what did they think of for 30 minutes? They replayed conversations that they had in the last couple of days.
Real.
For the record, a man has never replayed conversations that they've had.
Do that?
I
Our
do that
brains,
all the time.
our
I do that
brains are
too.
different, everybody.
Do you really not do that?
I feel like I overthink
No, of
everything.
course not.
You don't
Hold
think
on,
about
I'm making-
conversations that
You've
you
never
have?
had like a shower arguments or like shower thoughts or anything like that?
No, and that's not society, my friend. That is biology. You are wired to have those rethought. We aren't. It's not a learned behavior. It's not about dolls. It's not about dresses. Our biology, our brains are made differently.
You've
I don't
really
think
never thought
anyone's
about a
disputing that we
conversation
have
after?
like different.
We don't
Yeah, no,
replay
I
any
agree with that.
conversations.
Ever.
Men
I
You've
agree with
never
that,
like
but
done that.
The thing
Am I trans? Because sometimes sometimes I will.
You gotta go on
Very
hormone
rarely,
blockers.
though. Very rarely. Sometimes, occasionally.
Men are
I'll
very
replay
forward
conversation.
thinking. What is next? the job, the interview tomorrow. And not saying women aren't. Women are very reflective. That's why females are better at poetry. Women are better at the more relational type aspects of being a nurse or an elementary school teacher. Again, that's not learned behavior. There is a biological element to it, and it starts with, we don't even understand the brain as much as we can. We understand like 1% of 1% of it. But I think that study and your reaction affirms it, because if I had a group of men around you, like, what do you think of when you're alone? Like, I just think of the NFC Championship game, the stock market, and all the women I've been with or the women I want to be with. It's a little different.
Do you think if they had conducted the study in a different country that the men and women would have given the same answers?
Yes, I think that these things are universal. And I mean, I can't say to that, that would be my speculation, that the men in Iran are thinking about soccer and Persian women, and the women are thinking about, what's going on in their local neighborhood. These things transcend continent, they transcend culture, and we know that because one of the arguments that you were making is that, well, at the fundamental root, these are learned and acted, these are put on by Western society, but you go into African villages, like very poor third world African villages, they don't even have a term for transgender. The idea that a man can become a woman or a woman can become man, this is a uniquely Western phenomenon that is born out of the academy, born out of college, that I will say, and I think we could agree, is largely they prey on people that have other underlying issues, and then it gets built on top of that. Autism spectrum disorder, depression, anxiety, some other sort of bipolar, schizophrenia, trauma, things of that nature.
There's a couple of things to push back here. Brian.
If you can, quick.
I don't mean to monopolize. I'm sorry, Pixie.
No, it's okay. There's a couple of things. I do want to push back on that because there are communities and cultures that we could search up right now in China, India, various Native American histories that have recognized the idea of third gender or outside gender that doesn't fit into this binary. So I wouldn't say it's just Western.
That is
and then
true.
On top
Wait,
of that,
let them answer.
No, you please continue. You are right. I can address that at length. I don't think it's fruitful.
Okay.
Keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You're not wrong.
And then on top of that, you gave a case study. I kind of want to give a case study back. NPR did a article on this. I can't remember the name, but basically it was about a person who felt gender fluid. And when they felt like they were a man and they did things like spatial recognition or other tests regarding that, they would score like a man does, higher than most women. But when they got into the mindset of being a woman, they would score higher in woman-related tasks. So yeah, it does come back. You're saying this is all predisposed biology, but there might be something to be said about oh no, if you're thinking like a man, the mindset of a man, maybe that's more in tune with certain ways of thinking versus thinking like a woman. That doesn't mean it's all 100% biological basis. It means that hey, if you're raised to think in a certain pattern, you're going to perform in that pattern.
I agree. I mean, if a society can mold you, of course, but you're dealing with very powerful raw material that's underestimated in the current cultural conversation. And you can only guide that raw material so much. So let me ask another hypothetical. I'll just tell you, if I sit down with men, what do they always talk about? They talk about macro concepts, big things, stock market, sports, things that are very, let's just say bigger than individual. Women, if you sit down, they'll talk a lot about conversations or relationships, their kids, very micro. This, one of the reasons why men and women brains are different, and they continue to be different, is there's different skill sets. And I think we can all acknowledge that. Men are better at some things than women, and women are better at some things than men. I don't know why that is a wildly
the way that you frame it is women are awesome at small talk and sewing or whatever, and then men are just awesome at the stock market and being CEOs.
Let me ask you a question.
I don't think these are.
But hold on.
You see them equally.
Let me ask you a question. Why is it that the International Chess Foundation doesn't want biological men who believe they are women to compete with women? They say that will not allow trans men into the female category. Why is that?
I can't speak to that, but I'm just, if you're going to talk about representation being the thing that lets you know that, oh, men are obviously smarter, you could break this down to race.
I never said smarter. I said different.
Then different.
Women.
Okay, then we could say this.
My wife does things with my child that I can't even dream of doing, such as having an intuition, compassion, empathy. She can operate on 30 minutes of sleep. I need 8 hours, or else I'm like a
Don't underestimate yourself, Charlie.
Hold
I
on
think
a second.
You
No,
can
hold on. No, women have a different giftedness, I believe, given by God that is completely different than men. I never said smarter. In fact, a woman's intuition is far better than my intuition. I trust my wife's gut when it comes to people, when it comes to relationships, and she leans on me for investments or politics. We are given different gifting. Now, with that being said, some women have a gifting in that direction. Those are the exception, though. There is a general rule, and the general rule is that women are far more gifted at people and caretaking and the intimate. I don't mean that demeaning or derogatory. I never use the word smarter or dumber.
I
that you might
agree.
be inferred. Oh, thank you, Molly.
Yeah. No, I actually very much agree with what you're saying. Me personally, I mean, sexuality is a big part of my life, and I think what you're saying actually really ties into a lot of like sexuality, because it's the man's role to be, you know, kind of like I mean, if you're talking like the nuclear family, you know, it's like the man's role to kind of be the governing force of the family, take care of everything on the outside, take care of, you know, the finances, the stocks, all of that, and to kind of be the rock for all of the little things that the woman has to go through during the day. Just all the little conversations, all the things that she has to deal with that you're not there. And I think that, you know, it's a really beautiful thing, like yin and yang, you know, like there's
beautiful.
Parts of men that complement women, and there's parts of women that complement men. And the best thing is there's things that women can do that men cannot, and there's things that men can do that women cannot. And I think that the issue is we try and figure out like who's better, who's more powerful, who can, you know, who gets to say what happens. And I think that the issue that's really dividing, and the beauty comes when you kind of bring those skills together.
That's wonderfully said, Molly.
That was beautiful, Molly. Let me